All right. Welcome, world. Happy Black History Month. We are wrapping up the month of February with the most awesome month in the world. I'm just going to say that being African American, but I'm sure every month is a great month and we have a lot of diversity in our city of Chicago. So I'll take that back. Every month's the best month as we celebrate culture and wellness. But today we are in our second month of our book club, and we are tackling the heavy hitter post traumatic slave syndrome in honor and homage to Black History Month and our ancestors and all that good stuff. And just Dr. Joy Degruy did a beautiful job in writing this book and educating just everyone on just how traumatic slavery was and how we're still seeing that impact mental health today. And so throughout our chat today, I'll be referencing her as Dr. Joy today and going over what this post-traumatic slave syndrome is. And we're going to dive in some topics like we did last month, where we're addressing things that are mental health, wellness, all that good stuff, and how it ties all together to provide you guys with knowledge, education, training, and just having those difficult conversations. That's what these talks are about. And so Dr. Joy explains that this post-traumatic slave syndrome is a theory that explains some of the adaptive survival behaviors that you see often in African American communities throughout the United States and the whole diaspora, right? And so this syndrome kind of exists as a consequence, in a sense, of all this multi-generational oppression that you've seen African Americans endure, their descendants, and things that were impact from the chattel slavery method. And so this slavery was pretty predicated on the idea that, African Americans were inheritedly and genetically inferior to others. And of course, people can say, slavery was in all cultures, right? But it was a little different for African Americans in that these perpetual injuries are continued today when we see institutionalized racism and other small microaggressions and things that we see every day. And so this condition Dr. Joy shares in this book exists, again, when we see these multi-generational traumas. We see grandmama had it, great grandma had it, I have it, I'm passing it on to my children, and the centuries and centuries of slavery and the continuous of oppression and institutionalization of racism today. And so it is the belief that the benefits of society, no matter if it's real or it's imagined by the individual, is that they live in a world which things are inaccessible to them. And so it is this trauma together that continues this cycle of oppression, and that there's this absence of opportunities that's not available that can lead to this post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so we'll go in more details about the three categories that Dr. Joy talks about, which is this vacant esteem, ever-present anger, which we'll have Pamela chime in as our anger management therapist, and then racial socialization. And so as we go in this talk, it's going to be difficult. And, again, it's Black History Month, and we want to glorify all the great works, and we want to talk about King and, Harriet Tubman and, the worldwide of Black individuals that have impacted African-American life today. But we also got to pay homage to the past and become more aware. And as I say, woke, but we're going to be woke and really be woke, in some of the things that we will never forget. And not to harbor on, not moving on and moving forward, but also to know when we see things that isn't right and why we see the behaviors that we do. And so Dr. Joy helps us do that beautifully in this book, talking about the things that happened through the transatlantic slave trade. There's so many other topics that will be introduced in this book that we won't go into discussion. I mean, we're talking about life in bondage, rape, beatings, this illusion of race, Jim Crow, education and workplace disparities, civil rights trauma, current incarceration, injustice in policing. Today, we won't go into those deep because we want to be sensitive to those topics, but also highlight some of the beautiful things she talks about, which we'll go into. And a lot of that is centered around healing. So we want to make sure that we touch on those too. And so with that, I want to open the floor to my beautiful staff, Pamela and Diamond, who are therapists on staff at the Encompassing Center. Just doing a grounding exercise and seeing how you guys are feeling at this moment, knowing what you read in the heavy material that was in this book by Dr. Joy Degruy.
Man,
I know it's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. I actually finished the book recently, and I just remember crying at the end of the book, and like, because like you just feel so many emotions. I felt like, very uncomfortable. There was a lot of disgust I felt, because like I was saying, like I, as like a white person, read about these things like growing up in like, the one page, Black American history we have in school. But it's never this much in detail. And this book just goes really into detail, and for a good purpose, right? To remind us exactly, like, be present and, just even try to imagine how people felt around this time. And it made me feel really uncomfortable, and it was really hard, but it was really beautifully done, especially at the end. I guess I won't say what happens at the end because I want people to read it. But I just was like, I think my body was just like finally just crying because it was taking in so much and didn't want to, was just repressing a lot of emotion until finally I'm like, okay, time to cry. But yeah.
Right. And then if you don't mind, would you mind sharing with the group? Because I know you identify yourself as white, but where are you originally from, Pamela?
Yeah. So my family's from Mexico. I would identify as being Mexican American or Chicana. Even though, I grew up here in Chicago. And I'm definitely white skin, white passing. I definitely do hear a lot of, she does talk a lot about the Hispanic community in this book as well. So, I could relate with like my family members and, what they have also gone through, but obviously very different, hard to compare. But yeah, that's a little bit about my background.
And I brought that up because I want people that are listening and watching that are not identified as African American to not feel like, oh, I can't relate. I don't know what I could do and things like that. And you're just a beautiful example of something very similar that African Americans have gone through, where people who were able to go what they call white passing were able to infiltrate this idea of being someone that they weren't because society treated them different, where they can walk in the room because they have the very fair skin and the the Eurocentric straight hair and things like that. And so having you be white passing but be of Latina descent is very similar to an African American back in the day who was like white passing, or even in corporate America today, if someone walked in and they look more Eurocentric, may get a different approach than like someone coming in with dark skin and they're pretty fro. They may get looked at differently in a professional sense. So I want people to know that this topic and discussion could be, anybody could have this talk and this conversation because it applies across a lot of cultures.
100%. And there's a part in the book, not trying to get already into the book, but
you're fine.
She describes her sister-in-law in a situation, and I love this story because I had seen it before somewhere back in college, but I didn't know it came from this book. And And I always remember just keeping it really close to me. And then rereading it today, it's just like, oh, it's so nice for, anyone to read. But pretty much, she explains a situation where her sister-in-law is biracial, and Joey describes that her sister-in-law looks like a white woman, like any white woman.
Mhm.
And she said, like, yeah, she came in, paid for her groceries, gave her a check and left, or, waited for me. And when it was my turn, Joy, who is of darker complexion, right away, her attitude changed. The cashier, she was like, oh, can I get 2 forms of ID? And then went further to like check her ID to see if it was like in like, fraudulent names that they had. And I think her name was Kathleen, comes in and goes, why are you doing this, to the cashier? And right away, that's when Joy's like, yeah, like this is how your white privilege should be used. You being able to like open up your voice, especially in situations where, people of color may feel more uncomfortable or may feel humiliated, and just like really be able to be like, that is wrong, and really use, that privilege for the better good. And that's when I was like, it clicks, right? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly how it should be done.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sticks
So
with me
many
so much.
movies too that like there was a recent movie, I think it's called Passing,
Mm.
that was released. My favorite, oh, I will bawl like a baby today, Imitation of Life, the one where
Mm.
Mahalia Jackson sings.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
where the daughter is just so mean to her mother because her mother's dark and she's white passing.
yeah.
And
I'm
at
writing this
the
down,
end,
imitation
it
of
was
life.
just like she was trying to crawl and get in, as they say, climbing in the casket in the Black community, when you're just like, no. But she treated her mother so horribly because she was messing up her life because she tried to build this life off something that was not her. So thinking about that as we move into discussion, some of the things I want to highlight that Dr. Joy talks about is like this power of belief and how it's such a powerful thing, and that this the idea of belief colors everything that we come into contact with. So it's how we perceive things, how we evaluate, how it shapes our memories, influence how we think, act, and feel. And that, you know, another piece she talks about is this idea of just African American culture and relationships, how relationships are so crucial, and how the role of relationships in our community helps us differentiate between things that are harmful or dysfunctional to us versus what's adaptive, what's positive and normal. And so she did that. She shared something which I thought, and we discussed this off, our talk today, about how, like, when you look at Black children, how motivators, love is something that is very motivating for kids over rewards. So it's like, you can give me a sticker all day, but if you love on me, you may get much more out of me. And it reminds me of like the community as a whole, African Americans as a whole. It's like you hear talks about reparations, right? And oh, we want to get, paid for our pain and suffering. But it's like, no, we just want to be loved on. Like, we want to be appreciated, respected, and treated very similar and the same as our counterpart that looks different from us. And so I love that, how she puts those things together. And I want to charge you guys, when you read about that, about relationship and culture and just this power of belief, what do you guys think about that? And how do you guys work with clients in building relationship and helping them really dive into what they believe about themselves when they come in for mental health services?
Yeah. Relationships and how you form them. And I feel like with family, especially too, just defines so much. It defines a community. I feel like a lot of things are so lost. We're so divided and we're so separated and okay with not having relationships, right? Um, Everybody is okay with not, if they have this one relationship, it's okay, I don't have to have any other relationships, right? But it's normal. It's okay. Like, it's supposed to be healthy. You know, with children, it takes a village.
Mhm.
So I feel like a lot of that starts at home. Like, I feel like if you don't have a lot of community, a lot of love, a lot of, you know, joy, a lot of motivation there, you're not going to want to get that from nowhere else. And you're okay with just being away from it. You're okay from never going to find it. And I feel like everybody is so okay with not going to find that now. Like with my clients too, I give them time, you know, in the beginning, like I don't go, you know, you don't unvalidate what they feel, right? If a person has been through so much, you know, with these different people, multiple different people, of course they're going to be like, I don't want to talk to nobody, just me, myself, and I, right? But I agree with them. I get it. I understand. But it's okay. You're going to have better relationships. It's just you had to get rid of these ones. You know, you had to get rid of the ones that didn't suit you. You had to figure out what love was. And now you're slowly trying to figure that out. Part of that is just, how do you want to feel? What do you want? Like, do you want someone to hug you? Do you want someone to, you know, tell you you're beautiful? Do you want someone to motivate you and feed life into you? You know, go and get just that and don't take just anything. But I think it's such a big thing with culture because we work and we, you know, excel so much in community, you know, us being together, making statements, you know, like with George Floyd, us coming together, country, state by state, country by country, is what moved us. It was a big thing, you know, and that spoke, you know, towards what you just said, Jennifer, about, you know, if you just love us, you know, we had, it made me so happy to see like some of the white people that were out there and those white celebrities who were pouring milk into people's eyes, who were getting, you know, tear gassed and, you know, helping people in those ways or being, I remember one picture that stood out, you know, it was just a whole row of like, you know, white people just standing and blocking the rest of these Black protesters, right, from the police. And it's just like, that's what we want. That's all we want. Like, that's all we ever wanted. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it speaks so much, especially to present day, and to a lot of the things that I see and a lot of the ways that we're just moving out of, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess also just to, you know, go off some examples from like what Diamond said as well. What, you know, I try to do in therapy is, you know, making sure our clients do affirmations, whether they're 5 years old or, you know, 65. And I remember sometimes within the Black community, you know, I would have them, okay, what are your strengths? Like, do some affirmations. And they would say it aloud and they would kind of giggle.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's because you're not used to it. Like, you know, it was so easy for you to say like, oh, these negative things that, you know, you don't like about yourself or that you can improve. But why is it so hard for you? And why do you giggle when you say like, I'm pretty, you know? And so for them, it was also like, okay, maybe definitely speaking highly of myself, you know, having that confidence and doing, you know, if you need daily affirmations for sure, you know, I make sure to give that to parents with, you know, my young 5, 6, 7-year-old Black girls, which they love doing every morning and are getting better at. But also for my 65-year-old clients who think it's silly, but I'm like, that's because you're not used to saying it to yourself. So continuing to practice that. So to have that belief, you know, that they are so much more than what their mind thinks that they are.
It reminds me of the, as I say, we'll dive into the 3 categories of the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And the first one was that vacant esteem piece. And it's what we know about what self-esteem, it's like how we judge our worth. Like, what are we worth internally to others, collectively as a whole? And one thing I love that Dr. Joy says is that we should look at it more from like a talking about it more of a health standpoint, like what's our self-esteem health look like, and not so much, people hear like, oh, I got high self-esteem, I got low self-esteem. We run that word in the ground, right? But she said that it's high and low is just that measurement of your confidence and efficacy towards your esteem and how much, how confident you are in your worth or whatever. But when you start looking at how healthy is your esteem, you're looking more at, are you taking a more current, accurate and honest assessment of who you are? Because we know people can say, oh yes, I'm the hot stuff, I'm that, and not truly believe it. They're not really taking an honest assessment of themselves. Or if their esteem is very rigid on contingent on other things, how people see them. So if they're pretty, it's like, yeah, I got high self-esteem because I look good, but it's like, no, people are telling you and you really don't feel that good inside, and then making sure that we understand that the vacant esteem that happens is a result of influence of society, what society says, the stereotypes we see, media influences, community. What does the community say if you live in a certain area? And then our family. Oh my goodness, our family could be our worst critics. Like, oh, whose baby is that? She don't look like her father. You sure? Why is this one dark? Or not having conversations about sexuality, or being comfortable in having those discussions. Oh, you're not married yet. It's like, oh, that doesn't help. And so thinking of those things, community, society, and just our family, how have you guys seen that esteem be impacted with the people that you've worked with over the years, and how those little things could just impact how we feel, and as a group, African American people as a whole?
This is, a big topic that I work with a lot with my clients, like, especially when it comes to working on goals. Like, I have a client who's basically reached her goals, right? She's in the place to where she's done everything that she said she wanted to do. And she's just like still figuring it out. I'm just like, but look, this is what you said you wanted. This is what you're doing. And she's just like, okay, I have a hard time finding, being able to see the progress and living in the moment, and seeing like, that I've done something and feeling good about where I'm at, and it's because she's never been able to do that. It's because no one ever fed that good into her. She's never even experienced a lot of one-on-one time with parents, feeding that love. So it's a big topic, and it's a big thing to work on, even within, myself as a counselor on a daily basis, working on self-esteem. Some days you are in the mirror and able to say, and you can feel it, that, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm that girl today. And some days you just like, I don't see none of that. I don't see none of that. And you can have a more healthier self-esteem, on most of your days you can feel that day, that way, but it's a constant up and down, for everyone, I feel like. And just being able to, right. And, stuff constantly is happening, the world is constantly changing. Internet, like you said, we're always trying to keep up with the newest thing. It's always, people are now getting slimmer, trying to go back to getting slimmer, or there's a new is something always being changed to make you feel like, am I doing it right? Do I look right? Especially if it feels like you're not achieving or getting a lot of the things that other people are getting, especially like in relationships, getting into relationship. Oh, am I behind? Because I'm not married now, I'm not with the child now, all of those different things. So, just really trying to find the better messages and just put them in our face more, just pop them up everywhere so we can just walk around believing that more day and day.
Right. And we'll dive in a little bit to the third category, that racial socialization, which what you said reminds me of how some of the things that we see social media that is glorified today, or we see non-African descent people engaging in, that used to be very I don't know what the word I would say for that. And I'll give an example. So like you see the BBLs, the Brazilian butt lifts, or the lip injections and things like that. But when it's natural on an African American woman, we can go back in history. Sarah Bartman, who was a circus freak and like was a sex object for having a voluptuous butt. But now we have women paying dollars, like thousands, millions of dollars of work to get the very same lips, that is natural for someone that was like, oh, you're big lipped, you look like a gorilla and things like that. So it's when we have those conflicting measurements of what's safe and what's appropriate, what's good, it can be very confusing. And that leads me to the next thing, the second topic, the category she says is this ever-present anger. And what Dr. Joyce goes into is like, this idea of why are African Americans always so angry? Like, why are we always mad about something? And it's like, we have to center it back, because anger, we know, is a normal emotion, right? But we know when you talked about goals, right? Like my client has these goals, anger comes from when those goals get blocked. And so when those blocked goals continue over time, there's this sense of failure that sets in, right? And then once that happens, what's next? Fear. And then when that happens, we see the anger kind of bubbling and spilling over. And it's the response to the frustration. It's like, when I did this, it was looked at as a horrible thing. But then when someone else does it, it's like end or trendy or things like that. And we can see that in a lot of the disparities that we see that African Americans endure. But also, we are angry because there's so much violence, right? And there's so much aggression, and there's being degraded, humiliation, what you talked about as far as like George Floyd and all those things that are happening. Why is it happening to the people of color and not, someone else? And just being misrepresented, overall. We're walking in a room, and I think me and Pamela, we talked about this a little bit a couple of days ago, where, it was a point where if me and Diamond walked in a room for a job, who would get the job first? Me with the lighter skin, Eurocentric straight hair, versus Diamond with the natural curls and the darker skin. But then you see the flip today, where it's like, okay, Diamond may get it over me to fill the quota, like, oh, to say we're diverse, things like that. And now, natural hair and melanin is trendy. Is it only a trend, or will this continue? Like, that's my biggest fear, is to see what we're doing, even with mental health. It's like everybody's gung-ho about taking care of their mental health. Will this fizzle out in the next 50 years? Will Black Girl Magic fizzle out after the next thing comes over? And it's like, this is why we're angry. There's no consistency, and there's no safe space for us to be. And so thinking about some of those things I just shared with what Dr. Joy said, what are you guys' thoughts on just this ever-present anger? Or like, Pamela, if you want to share, what is one thing that's common when you see clients come in for anger management services?
Yeah. Something that stuck with me through doing anger management was, anger can very much be a secondary emotion. Behind anger, it's usually, sadness. And I always remember that, it was all of my clients. And I usually share with them that quote. And a lot of them usually stay quiet, or they're just like shaking their head. Because what I do see is, a lot of trauma, a lot of, like you said, right, Jennifer, being humiliated, not being heard, not having for my younger ones, not having people present in their lives supporting them. And it makes sense why you're upset, why you're mad, when that's the only way you get some type of reaction from anyone. When you've done everything else, then that's like the only way that somebody now is, you know, getting their attention. But something that she also kind of touched on very little, there was like one sentence that kind of made me like giggle, was like, are we angry? She's like, or are y'all just afraid? And I love that because I was just kind of like, yes, like, I don't like, she's like, there's not really much studies that show that, Black people are really a lot angrier than white people. Like, I think, it could also be just you having fear of the Black person.
Mhm.
And, I also share that too, because, I think, you know, correlation, causation does not cause correlation,
Yeah.
so I'm just like, huh, interesting. But no, I definitely took that part of the everlasting anger like really to heart because of all the work I do and anger management. Because it does have a lot of truth to it that and it makes me sad too because I talk to my clients, right? And there's like, I'm an angry person. I don't know what's wrong. Like, I'm just mad. This is who I am. And it's like, no, it's definitely not like that. And I really wish I could share, this book with all of them, and I definitely will. But it just comes from like also our epigenetics, like showing how we may have a higher stress hormone if, our family were slaves. Even if it was like a great great grandmother, like it's still there. And it still definitely hurts and opens a lot of trauma that, we may not even know it's there. And families don't always share that or talk about those experiences, but they're present. It's just not that they're mad or angry, but there's definitely trauma that has been passed down over generations that also needs to be talked about.
Right. And there's research on that, how, and we learn that a lot in trauma training when as
Yeah.
clinicians becoming trauma informed, we know that certain traumas can trigger certain genes to come on and off or alter gene makeup or even like what's the word I'm trying to think of, where it's so generational, where it's like this occurred, now you know why this person behaves the way they do, and because of that the next child is adapting to that trauma, and it's just like cycle after cycle after cycle. And it's very very different. And each family is traumatized, and then you put them in community, then everybody's traumatized, and then you have this collective too. So it just grows.
Right. And how I really just thought of it too, it's just like it feels like the labels of white people, they just took that and gave it to us once we started engaging in some of the things that they brought over to us. That's how that thinking of the last book that we read in January, how it ties into this book, thinking about how white people got here, the generation of them being aggressors, to get what they want. So that's angry getting put on to us. And then also laziness, because they just got people to do the work that they didn't want to do, or to figure out a way to generate things that they could sit back and just get wealth off of. So now, we go and engage in some of those things, or they see us engaging in some of those things. So now they just take that label off of them and don't recognize any of the things that they've done or their history, and just put it onto us. How can you call us lazy when you were the guys that brung us over there to do all the work for y'all? Like, how do you call us lazy for that? Also, like with you, like you'll often see that like with using welfare, oh, they're lazy, they don't want to get jobs because we're using welfare, right? But I remember my grandma telling me, she was like, the first people to have them was white folks. I found out about that from them. So how is something that was used to help everyone, and you guys who were living, fine without actually needing them, still getting them? So when we do it, we're now lazy, so it's just like, how everything is just switched. It's just throwing back and forth labels where no one is really listening and understanding and decompressing. And then people actually learning how to do that and understanding that that is going to lead to you not feeling as, tense about everything. Is it anger? Or is it really you just being tense? And even just thinking about, resting, the resting face that often people love to correct you on. And it's just like, I'm actually not mad. I'm just here. I'm just content right now. And you're telling me to straighten my face. I used to hear it so much. My aunt used to be like, why are you poking your lips out? And I'm just like, they're just here. So I've grown up like having that constantly on me, just a mean person. And that drew a lot of people away from me, not even just, other races, but either people in my skin. I remember one of my friends telling me, when I first met you, I was like, yeah, you were all your emotions on your sleeve. Like, I thought you were just mean and all of that. I'm just like, but I wasn't. I was just sitting there just doing nothing, but it just speaks to all of that also.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to what Dr. Joy shares about just, yes, slavery existed in all cultures, right? Africans even had their own set of slaves, but I love how she said that there was no way that they could have known that giving away their slaves to come to the Americas, they would have been treated the way they've been treated. And that, it's not about the idea of slavery, because yes, people own property. And again, it's across all cultures. Like, you can look at every ethnic group and there's some sense of slavery in some form, or, some different terms like indentured servants and things like that, whatever we want to dive into. But we have to really emphasize that the Americanized slavery, the length of it, the treatment of the servitude, it was just very horrible conditions. And she labels the two thoughts that the African American person, or the Black body, like our last book author noted, were thinking property or rightless individuals. So you don't have the right to have all these things, and that you are owned by somebody else. You can think, but you're still not your own self. And so thinking about that, it brings me to the last category for the post-traumatic slave syndrome, is this racial socialization, where we see this in every area, from gender, sexuality, skin color. We've had this talk offline too, where it's like, I remember back in the day where people would say, oh, you're light skinned, you think you're better than me, or the dark girl wasn't pretty. I think of just recently, there's been a huge topic about Jonathan Majors, the actor that did the modeling, and they questioned his masculinity. And it's like, this man has played every masculine role in life, and because he decided to wear pink and he was emulating another character and things like that, now he's gay or something like that. And how we take on the views of what Dr. Joy calls as our captors. So those that brought Africans over to the Americas and enslaved them. And how we adapt to what she calls is the slave master's value system. We see that when we look at just the history books of like which slaves got sold faster, the strong masculine man, or small children that can work longer. Is this child lighter, darker? Who could be the house, maiden or slave, or things like that. And so we see that in beauty standards today. We see that in material success. And sometimes we may not fit in those, like everyone doesn't have straight hair. Everyone's not going to get a master's degree, but is our worth contingent on whether our hair is curly or straight, or if we have a high school degree or not? we're still shaping our children to fit these little molds that they don't quite necessarily need to fit in or will fit in, and how that impacts us as a whole. And just thinking about that last piece, did you guys have any last thoughts on just those ideas that she presented in the book as well?
Yeah. The masculinity, femininity, the masculinity one, mostly, it's a big one. And it's just more and more and more present. But also, like, if you think about masculinity versus, what is not, in different cultures, is so different. It's also so different. In our culture, it's for the littlest things. It's for wearing the color pink. It's for having roses. It's for getting mayonnaise on a sandwich. It's for, I've heard something like asking a man for, if you're a man, you can't ask another man for strawberries, does he have some? Like, stuff like that. It's little things, and it's not even the actual act of, the sexual stuff. It's just the little things. But like, in a different culture, you more so, you're not masculine if you're not, you're seen as weak if you're not getting up and painting the whole house, or if you're not, you know if you wasn't able to go out and, get all this money and work, these jobs at a young age. A lot of them try to make more masculine men by putting their children out and making them live on their own, at the age of 18, and making them build up and making them be stronger. And, if you can't do that, then you're not a man, you're not masculine, a lot of those different things. So, and also thinking about what is being learned from that. Yes, it's horrible. I wouldn't recommend just throwing your child out there at 18, but survival skills, some bad survival skills, yes, but okay, I have to learn how to actually live. I have to learn how to budget. I have to learn how to do those things, versus I have to watch what I wear. I can't wear these certain colors. I gotta watch what words I say around people, and it's just tearing each other apart, and it's just like, it just speaks to, who am I supposed to be? We're always constantly trying to figure out who we are, what we're doing, what role am I playing in life, what is my purpose here? And then now I'm trying to figure out what is masculine and what is not by these little things that we do on a daily basis. The newest one I've heard is like, if you smoke a hookah, then that's not masculine, that's only for girls. And I'm just like, but it's created by men. So it's funny to think about it in this way. But on a larger scale, you having little boys coming up, and how are we going to raise these little boys to actually be men that is what we need, that take care of their children, that are hardworking men, that are able to walk with pride, that are, all of these different things that, a man can, have. How do we really raise them to be those good men? How do we do that? So, yeah.
Yeah. It's super important. And I love that you said yourself, because that leads us to the last piece of our segment for today. And Dr. Joy says the first step in knowing what is in need of, when she references healing, is that we need knowledge of our of our history. So establishing good mental, emotional, and physical health, and knowing the history and the background of things, and where things come from, and why we behave the way we behave, or react the way we react to things. And then she which I love, she says knowing your history is key to knowing yourself. And so knowing those things is going to be important with healing. And if you guys get the book, chapter 6 is all about healing. She goes into detail to like why we must heal, because we have multiple generations of unresolved injuries, as she calls it. How we must heal. Family is the foundation. We need to start with our families first, because we can be the most horrible critics to our own loved ones. and efficacy, knowing ourselves, like you said, Diamond, and then telling our story. And so wrapping up of all these things we talked about, what is one key thing you ladies want to leave to those that are watching this when it comes to the post-traumatic slave syndrome and this idea of healing, where we're telling our stories, we're knowing our history, we're knowing who we are, starting with family and really acknowledging these multi-generational injuries we've endured over the years?
For me, family and collaboration is a big one. Community, because Dr. Joy explains, like, back in the day, during slavery, Black people were against each other, right? It was hard, and they did it purposefully this way because they knew if they came together, it would be a whole different story. And so, that really sticks with me in today's age, definitely community collaboration, family, even if it's like you said, Jennifer, like just a small group gathering, like let's learn about our history, let's learn about our great grandmother, where did she go to high school? These simple conversations show that when there's unity and family, you not only think about yourself as, just you, but also you see yourself as the bigger picture. So no longer are you also looking out for yourself and your own success, but the success of future generations and those who came, before you, which I think is so important. And also just to touch on a little bit, unlike how white people can help, or white passing people, she mentions, like, some people be like, white people be like, oh my God, but I got like a Black Lives Matter shirt. And, am I doing my part? And I definitely laugh because I know people who have said this, right? And I definitely want to pull out that we have to do better, and realizing that in order to also be able to help in the Black community to heal, we also have to lose some of that privilege and be okay with that. So not everyone's ready, right, for those conversations, but I think it's important.
That's why we're having them.
Yeah. So that's what I got.
And that was, great. Mine kind of piggybacks off of that also, but it's just basically listen, just take a step back and listen to one another. And try to just understand, be empathetic, because you don't know what someone's been through. You don't know what their story is, even just surface level. Just try to be more understanding and listening, and we still always want to have accountability, and not make excuses for people, because, it's up to people to heal themselves and, process their own traumas. But just being able to understand and just listen, okay, this person just isn't really angry, they're just hurt. It's just a lot that's on them. And this is just the only way they know how to express it right now.
Yeah.
And just learning, just being more aware and just being open to learn. I think that's the most important things too, because if you sit down and listen to someone and just learn about them, you don't prejudge, you have the answers, and that could just help a lot, help us to be able to come together, or even come to a common ground, to be able to coexist with each other, live in harmony. So just listen and just be open to learning.
Well, those are some beautiful nuggets that I think we can end on our talk today. And so again, you guys, if you are interested in reading the book, go to your local library, get it on, I don't think it's on Audible, which I found weird.
I checked.
So you can get it at your local library, have these discussions. That's what this book club is about, to have those difficult discussions. And you can use this video clip to start having some of those conversations. And if you want to join us, reach out. Like I'll introduce you guys to our next book before we end, and it will be Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And this will be in honor of Women's History Month, or Women's Month, and for March. And so the premise is that stress looks a little different than women than men. So if you would like to join us, text 312-320-6363. Text I want to read. And then I'll reach out to you guys personally and see how I can get you this book. And then you can join me and Diamond next month as we continue with some heavy hitter topics throughout 2023. And so, ladies, as always, I thank you. I love you guys. I love that we're able to have a safe space to share and talk about what we feel, and then share with the community the things, the knowledge that we're saying. As I said last time, if you want to hide something, hide it in a book. But no, we're bringing the book to you guys. So thank you. Thank you. Again, happy Black History Month to the world. You guys stay safe. And if you want to reach out, Diamond and Pamela, they're excellent in what they do. They are two therapists on staff at the Encompassing Center. So hey, if you want to work on this healing that we've talked about, give us a call. So
Yeah, give us a call.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you,
next
girl.
book
Thank you,
session.
ladies. And again, happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
Bye.